At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's General G. Let's begin. When humanity first took to the stars and joined the Galactic Federation, they found themselves in the midst of the fiercest war the galaxy had ever known, with Earth dragged into the conflict within months. All because the enemy's advance seemed inevitable. By the time the tides had turned with humanity's aid and the final great battle was underway, a most unusual first contact occurred, perhaps the strangest and certainly the kindest of them all. It began when fighter pilot Nix Maxim crashed on an uncharted planet, where he met a young child determined not to let the Skyman die, even though all he had to offer was his last fruit. The moment Nix Maxim's Federation fighter touched the alien tree line, he knew this wasn't the kind of crash one walked away from. The towering purple-barked giants, each easily 200 meters tall, caught his ship like a child's toy in their canopy. Metal screamed as branches thicker than shuttle bays punched through the hull, and then came the sickening sensation of his craft being torn in two. The forward section, containing the cockpit where Nix sat strapped in, spun wildly as it separated from the aft engines. Through the chaos of alarms and the spider webbing of his canopy, he caught glimpses of the other half of his ship, cartwheeling through the massive branches, trailing fire and debris. His hands flew over the controls, fighting for any semblance of control as gravity reasserted its dominance. "Should have let the bastard go," he thought bitterly, remembering the Kardak fighter he'd pursued through its desperate retreat jump. The enemy pilot had led him here, to this uncharted world that wasn't supposed to have any strategic value. Their dogfight in the upper atmosphere had been brutal, a chaotic display of plasma bolts and evasive maneuvers that had pushed both ships to their limits. The Kardak had lost that fight. Nix had seen the satisfying bloom of fire as his final volley tore through the enemy's engines, sending it tumbling into the atmosphere in an uncontrolled descent. No way that pilot survived. At least he accomplished his mission, even if... Another impact jarred him from his thoughts. The forward section of his fighter had found the forest floor, but not before carving a path of destruction through the smaller trees. The inertial dampeners, already damaged, failed completely. Nix felt his legs snap like twigs as the cockpit crumbled, pinning him in place. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and overwhelming. Then, mercifully, darkness took him. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came the pain, a symphony of agony that made him wish for the darkness again. His legs were shattered, that much was certain. Every breath sent spikes of fire through his chest, suggesting broken ribs at minimum. Internal injuries? Almost certainly, though somehow not immediately fatal. The miracle, if it could be called that, was that he'd managed to drag himself from the wreckage before the power cells went critical. The explosion had been muted, contained by the ship's failing systems, but it had scattered what remained of his ship's supplies across a 100-meter radius. 7 days, that's how long he'd been here, marking time by the rise and fall of the single yellow sun that dominated the lavender sky. 7 days of rationing his emergency supplies, of dragging his broken body exactly 50 meters from the crash site to the shade of a lone tree. Those 50 meters had taken him hours to traverse, leaving a trail of blood and disturbed earth that told the story of his determination to find shelter from the blazing sun. His emergency beacon blinked steadily among the debris, a rhythmic light of hope in the scattered wreckage. Had his SOS made it through before the crash? He'd been too focused on finding any landing site that wasn't solid rock to be certain. The FTL burst transmitter had shown green for a fraction of a second before everything went to hell. Maybe. Possibly. The rations had run out this morning. He'd stretched them as far as possible, but 7 days was pushing the limit of the emergency supplies. His water recycler still functioned, another small miracle, but food was gone. He'd contemplated dragging himself deeper into the forest, seeking what? Edible plants on an alien world? Water sources his recycler couldn't process? It would be suicide. Besides, the nights had taught him this world was far from empty. Strange calls echoed through the darkness, not quite animal, not quite familiar. Bioluminescent shapes fitted between the trees, and more than once he'd seen eyes reflecting the light from his beacon. Whatever lived here had kept its distance so far, perhaps wary of the strange metal debris and the alien scent of his blood. Venturing into their domain while helpless would only hasten the inevitable. Nope, his best chance was to stay put, stay visible, stay alive. The beacon would bring rescue or enemies, and at this point, Nix wasn't sure which would arrive first. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. His throat was dry despite the recycler, and his vision had begun to blur at the edges. Never a good sign. He'd stopped checking his legs days ago. The swelling and discoloration told him everything he needed to know about their condition. Come on, he thought, watching the beacon steady blinking. Someone has to be looking. The Kardak fled here en masse. Command won't ignore that. A rustling from behind him made him freeze. It came from a cluster of pink shrubs about 10 meters away, their fern-like fronds swaying despite the still air. His hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm before remembering he'd lost it in the crash. All he had was his survival knife, and in his condition, he might as well try to fight with a toothpick. The rustling intensified. Whatever approached wasn't trying to be stealthy. Branches snapped, leaves crunched. Nix's heart rate spiked, sending fresh waves of pain through his chest. After 7 days, his luck had finally run out. He wondered, idly, what passed for predators on this world. Something quick, he hoped. The creature that emerged from the pink foliage was nothing like what Nix had expected. It was small, perhaps a meter tall, and walked on 2 legs with a gait that seemed almost hesitant. Green skin dotted with white spots dominated its exterior, the texture reminding him impossibly of Earth's tree frogs. But it was the face that made him catch his breath. Despite the alien features, something in its structure was almost human. Large eyes dominated the face, currently wide with what looked like curiosity or fear. Silver hair, fine as silk thread, framed features that could only belong to a child. The being wore what appeared to be rough woven cloth, tattered and patched in places. In its small hands it clutched something bright red, a sphere about the size of Nix's fist that might have been fruit or some kind of candy. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. The child, for Nix couldn't think of it as anything else, took a tentative step forward, then another. Its movements were careful, as if approaching a dangerous animal. "Hey!" Nix said softly, his voice tired. The sound of it sent the child scrambling back toward the shrubs, and Nix cursed himself. Of course, his alien vocal cords would sound threatening. But the child didn't flee entirely. It hovered at the edge of the foliage, peering out with those enormous eyes. Nix remained perfectly still, not wanting to spook it further. This was first contact, not the kind they trained for at the academy, but first contact nonetheless. No protocol covered meeting alien children while dying of injuries on an uncharted world. Slowly, moving like a skittish animal, the child emerged again. This time, when Nix remained silent and still, it grew bolder. Step by step it approached, clutching the red object like a talisman. At 5 meters, it stopped and tilted its head, studying him with an intensity that seemed too mature for its apparent age. The child made a sound, gentle, almost like birdsong. Obviously language, but nothing Nix's translator implant could parse. He wasn't surprised. The implant needed baseline data to work with, and this species was completely unknown. "I can't understand you," Nix said quietly, trying to keep his tone gentle despite the pain. "But I'm friendly. Friend, see?" He attempted a smile, though he suspected it looked more like a grimace. The child chirped again, then did something unexpected. It sat down, maintaining its distance but clearly settling in for a longer observation. The red sphere rested in its lap as it continued to study him with those remarkable eyes. They sat like that as the sun continued its descent, alien child and broken pilot, neither understanding the other but both seemingly content to simply exist in each other's presence. Nix found himself oddly comforted. If he was going to die here, at least he wouldn't die alone. even if his only companion was a curious alien child who, "You smell wrong." Nix jerked so hard he nearly blacked out from the pain. The words had come from the child, rendered in perfect standard by his translator implant. "How do I understand you?" he gasped when his vision cleared. The child tilted its head. "The words in head make your sounds into my sounds. The gods gave us words in head so we could understand when they visit." "Gods?" Nix filed that away for later. "You have translator implants?" "Translator," the child repeated carefully. "Is that what the gods call words in head? Mother says we must never remove them, or the gods become angry, very angry." A shadow passed over the child's features. "Are you a god? You fell from the sky like gods do, but you're hurt. Gods don't get hurt." "I'm not a god," Nick said carefully. "I'm like you, just from very far away. My name is Nix. What's yours?" "Jeer." The child scooted a bit closer, fascination overcoming caution. "Mother says I shouldn't go near the gods' things, but I saw you fall. Your skybird fought with another skybird. I watched from the tall tree where I play. The other skybird fell too, in pieces, very far. It made the ground shake." So the child had seen the dogfight. Nix wondered how often these people saw Kardak ships. The fact they called them gods was troubling. "Jeer," Nix said slowly, "these gods, what do they do when they visit?" The child's expression darkened. "They take things. The shiny rocks from the deep places, the tall trees, sometimes." Jeer's voice took on a quiet tone. "Sometimes they take people. The warriors went with them last season. Mother says they went to walk in the holy mountains, but they haven't come back. She cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." White-hot rage flared in Nix's chest, momentarily overwhelming even the pain. He'd seen enough Kardak operations to know what happened to warriors taken for walks. Slave labor at best, conscription as cannon fodder at worst. And these people thought the Kardak were gods. "Jeer," he said, fighting to keep his voice level, "the beings you call gods, they're not gods. They're called Kardak, and where I come from, we're fighting them. They're losing. In a few months, they'll all be gone." The child's eyes went impossibly wide. "Gone? The gods will be gone?" Then, with the pure innocence only a child could possess, Jeer broke into a brilliant smile. "Does that mean the fruit will grow again? The gods take all the best trees, and Mother says that's why my favorite fruit is so hard to find now. I only have one left." He held up the red sphere proudly. "I was saving it, but if the gods will be gone, there will be more." The simple joy in the child's voice made Nix's throat tighten. This kid was celebrating the return of fruit trees while his people were being enslaved and exploited. The injustice of it all made him want to scream. "Yes," he managed, "there will be more fruit trees. The Kardak, the false gods, won't take anything from your world again." Jeer studied him for a long moment, then looked down at the red fruit in his hands. "You've been here many days. The birds that clean bones haven't been watching. You must be hungry." "I'm fine," Nix lied automatically. "Mother says lying is bad," Jeer said solemnly. "She also says sharing is good, even when you only have a little." He stood up and approached slowly, still cautious but determined. "The Skyman who fights the bad gods should not die hungry." "Jeer, no, that's your last." But the child was already pressing the fruit into Nix's hands. It was warm from being held, the skin smooth and yielding like a ripe peach. This close, Nix could see the delicate pattern of the child's spots, the earnest concern in those two large eyes. "Eat," Jeer insisted. "Mother will be angry if I'm late, but you need this more than me. When the gods are gone, I'll have many fruits. You helped make that happen, so this one is yours." Nick stared at the fruit, his vision blurring for reasons that had nothing to do with his injuries. This child, who had nothing, was giving him everything. His last fruit, precious because of its scarcity, offered freely to a dying stranger who'd fallen from the sky. "Thank you," he whispered, and bit into the fruit. It was sweet and tart, juice running down his chin. And it was the most incredible thing he'd ever tasted. Not because of its flavor, though that was remarkable, but because of what it represented: kindness, innocence, hope. Jir watched him eat with satisfaction, then glanced at the darkening sky. "I have to go. Mother worries, but I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll bring water. We have lots of water." "Jir, wait!" But the child was already disappearing into the foliage, moving with the ease of someone who knew every root and stone. His voice drifted back, young and hopeful. "Don't die, Skyman Nix. When the bad gods are gone, I want to show you where all the fruit trees will grow again." Then he was gone, leaving Nix alone with the taste of alien fruit on his lips and tears on his cheeks. He looked at the empty rind in his hands, then at the beacon still blinking steadily in the wreckage. "If I survive this," he thought fiercely, "I don't care what regulations I have to break or whose desk I have to pound. The Federation is going to help these people. We're going to undo every damn thing the Kardak did to this world." The night sounds began as darkness fell, but for the first time in 7 days they didn't seem threatening. Somewhere out there, a child was telling his mother about the strange skyman who wasn't a god. Somewhere out there, people were dreaming of fruit trees growing again. Nix clutched the fruit rind like a talisman and stared at the stars beginning to emerge. His legs were still shattered. He was still dying. But for now, he had a reason to fight for every breath, every hour, every day until rescue came. He would not let Jir's kindness be wasted. For Jir, he would survive. For that last fruit freely given, he would endure. He had promises to keep. Azil knew something had changed in her son the moment he returned home that night, 2 days ago. He'd been late, worryingly so, and when he finally slipped through their wooden door, his eyes held a light she hadn't seen since before the gods had taken his father with the other warriors to walk in the holy mountains. "Mother, the gods aren't gods," he had announced breathlessly. Dirt smudged across his spotted cheeks. "The hurt Skyman told me. They're called Kardak, and they're bad, and they're going to be gone soon, and the fruit trees will grow back." She checked him for fever first, pressing her palm against his forehead while he squirmed impatiently. The words spilling from him made no sense. Hurt skymen, false gods, promises of restored forests? In their small home, lit by the soft yellow glow of mushroom in glass jars and warmed by the crackling fireplace, such fantasies seemed especially wild. "Jir," she said gently, guiding him to sit on their worn cushions, "you must not speak of things about the gods. If they hear—" "But, Mother, he's different. He fell from the sky fighting another skybird. He's hurt, very bad. His legs don't work right, and he's been by the metal trees for 7 days. I gave him my last red fruit because he was hungry." That had stopped her cold. "You gave away your fruit? Jir, you've been saving that for when I was very sad or very happy," Jir finished. "And I was very happy, Mother. The Skyman Nix, he says his people are fighting the Kardak and winning. No more taking our trees, no more taking our people." Azil had held her son close then, feeling his small heart beating quick as a bird's against her chest. In her mind, and only in her mind, she didn't call them gods. She called them demons. Demons who wore the mask of divinity while they stripped their world bare. Demons who had taken Kelm and the others, promising honor and returning only silence. But such thoughts were dangerous, even unspoken. The implants they all wore, the words in head that let them understand the demons' harsh language, might do more than translate. Who knew what else the demons could hear through them? "Jir," she whispered, "you must not go back there. If they find out about this Skyman—" "He needs help, Mother. I promised I'd bring water." And so it had gone for 2 days. Each morning, Jir would slip out with a water gourd hidden under his ragged cloak. Each evening, he'd return with stories that grew more elaborate, and also harder to believe. The Skyman was called a human. His people lived among the stars just like the gods, but they protected instead of taking. They would help Jir's people once the war was over. Azel wanted to forbid this imaginary friend, but she'd seen what grief had done to her son after his father disappeared. This was the first hope he'd shown in a full season. How could she take that away, even if it was built on imagination? She'd started adding extra portions to their morning meal, knowing full well where the surplus went. If her son wanted to feed his imaginary friend, what harm could it do? The stranger would die soon. Jir spoke of injuries getting worse, and Jir would grieve, but he would recover. Children always did. Except now it was the third day, and Jir was late again. Azel was tending the fire when Jir burst through the door, tears streaming down his face. Her heart clenched as she dropped the poker and rushed to him. "What happened? Are you hurt? Did someone find you?" "He's gone," Jir wailed, throwing himself into her arms. "The Skyman is gone." She held him tight, running her fingers through his silver hair. So, the imaginary friend had finally died. She'd expected this, prepared for it, but seeing her son's grief still cut deep. "I'm sorry, my light. Death comes to all." "No, Mother, he didn't die." Jir pulled back, and she saw his tears were mixed with something else. Joy? "They came for him, just like he said they would." "Who came?" "The other humans. 3 skybirds, but different from the gods' birds. Smoother, quieter. They landed right by the metal trees and humans came out. They looked like Nick's but with no hurts. They put him on a floating bed and took him into their skybird. But, Mother," his expression grew wondering, "one of them saw me hiding. She had hair like the sun and skin like dark earth, and she smiled at me. She put her finger to her lips like this," he demonstrated, "like it was our secret. Then they flew away straight up into the sky until I couldn't see them anymore." Azel felt a chill run down her spine. If even there was a small chance that this was more than imagination, "You're certain they were not the gods' servants?" "They were nothing like the false gods." Jir caught himself, eyes widening at using the forbidden words. But Azel didn't correct him, not this time. "Their skybirds sang different, softer, and they were careful with Nyx, so careful. The false gods would have kicked him for being weak." That was true enough. The demons showed no compassion for weakness. She'd seen enough of their visits to know that. "Mother," Jir said quietly, "do you think it's real, what Nyx said about the false gods going away?" Azel looked into her son's eyes, his father's eyes, and made a decision. "I don't know, my light, but perhaps we can hope." It was a dangerous thing, hope, but as she held her son and listened to him describe the rescue, she felt it kindle in her chest anyway, a tiny flame carefully guarded. Maybe, just maybe, this was more than just her young son's imagination. The first rumors reached their village 3 months later. Azel was bartering preserved mushrooms in the market when she overheard Ketna, the merchant, speaking in hushed tones to her customers. "Saw it myself on the road from Broken Hill. The gods' tall tower, the one that scraped the sky itself, gone. Nothing but melted stone and glass." "Lightning?" someone suggested. "No, lightning does that. And traders from the far valleys say it's the same there. Every tower, every angry stone the gods built, all destroyed in a single night." Azel's hands trembled as she wrapped her mushrooms. Jir's words echoed in her mind. They're going to be gone soon. More stories trickled in over the following weeks. The gods of skybirds, those harsh metal shapes that had terrorized them for generations, were nowhere to be seen. The mines they'd forced the people to dig lay abandoned. The processing stations where they'd taken the extracted trees fell silent. "It's a test," some villagers whispered. "The gods will return and punish those who stray from their duties." But days became weeks, weeks became months, and still the skies remained empty of the gods' presence. Then came the morning when everything changed. Azel woke to Jir, shaking her shoulder, his face alight with wonder. "Mother, come look, come see!" She followed him outside, joining the crowd of villagers already gathered in the square. Everyone was staring at the eastern sky, where the sun should have been rising over the dust valley. That barren expanse where nothing had grown for 5 generations, not since the gods had taken all the water for their purposes. except it wasn't dust anymore. Where cracked earth and stone had stretched to the horizon, an ocean sparkled in the morning light. An impossible ocean, its waters the deep blue-green of precious stones, waves lapping at shores that hadn't existed when they'd gone to sleep. "How?" someone breathed. "Magic," another whispered. "No," Jir said, loud enough for all to hear. "Not magic. The humans. Nyx's people. They're fixing what the demons broke." Some villagers turned to stare at the boy. Azel pulled him closer, protective, but he stood tall. "My son has stories," she said carefully, "about a skyman he found in the forest." "It's not stories," Jir insisted. "He was real, and he said his people would help us once the demons were gone. Look!" He pointed at the impossible ocean. "They're keeping their promise." The crowd murmured, uncertain, but 3 days later, when they woke to find the burned lands covered in young forest, thousands upon thousands of saplings that seemed to have sprouted overnight, even the doubters began to wonder. The transformations continued over the years, each one more wondrous than the last. The 3 great forests that the demons had burned to feed their machines grew back stronger and taller than before. Springs that had been dry for generations bubbled back to life. The sacred trees, thought lost forever, began to appear among the new growth. And the fruit trees, the fruit trees, they grew everywhere now, heavy with bounty. Jir's beloved red fruits became common again, and he shared them freely with anyone who asked, always telling the story of the last one he'd given away. Almost no one believed him. As Jir grew from child to youth, many dismissed his tale as fantasy. A hurt skyman who promised salvation? A child's imagination running wild? Surely. Even when the traders brought news that the demons were truly gone, defeated in some great war among the stars, people found it easier to credit luck or divine intervention than a boy's strange friend. Azel believed, though, not at first, not completely. But as the miracles mounted and she watched her son grow strong and healthy in a healing world, she found her doubts fading. The perfection of it all, the way each restoration addressed exactly what the demons had taken, spoke of intention, not chance. When Jir was 15, tall for his age and spending his days helping to tend the new forests, a trader brought news that made Azel's heart skip. "Strange folk in the capital," the woman said, accepting a cup of tea in their home. "Not like us, but not like the gods either. They speak through the words in head, asking questions about our people, about our needs. They say they're observers? Whatever that means." "What did they look like?" Jir asked eagerly. "Different from each other, like they're many peoples in one. Some with skin as pale as moonflowers, others dark as good earth. Hair in colors I've never seen. Gold and fire and earth brown. They wear cloth that shifts and breathes, and they carry no weapons." "Humans," Jir breathed. "They're humans." The trader shrugged. "Oh, maybe so. They're kind enough. Fixed the broken well in the lower valley without being asked. Helped birth a difficult baby in River's End. They ask about the demons sometimes, about what they took and what we need. Then they go back to their skybird and fly away." That night, Jir could barely contain his excitement. "They're studying us, Mother, making sure we're ready. Nyx said they couldn't interfere with primitive species. That means people who aren't ready for the stars. But maybe now..." "Maybe now what?" Azel asked, though she suspected she knew. "Maybe now we're ready. Maybe they'll teach us, help us grow. Maybe..." His eyes grew distant. "Maybe I'll see him again." It was a quiet afternoon in Jir's 17th year when the knock came at their door. Azel was grinding spices while Jir worked on repairing a fishing net. The sound was so unexpected, visitors usually called out rather than knocking, that they both froze. "I'll get it," Azel said, wiping her green hands on her apron. She opened the door and found herself face to face with the strangest being she'd ever seen. He was tall, taller than any of her people, with skin the color of river sand and hair dark as night. His face was alien, the features too sharp, the nose too prominent, the eyes too small, and the wrong shade of blue. He wore clothes that seemed to shift between fabric and light, and he stood with the careful posture of someone trying not to frighten. But even as her mind catalogued all the differences, all the strangeness, a name rose unbidden to her lips. Nix? The stranger's face broke into a smile, a very human expression despite the alien features. Hello, Azel. I've heard so much about you. Behind her, something shattered. She turned to see Jir standing amid the remains of a water jug, his face pale with shock. It's you, her son whispered. You're really here. Hello, Jir. Nix's voice was warm, fond. You've grown. I almost didn't recognize you, but the eyes are the same. How's the fruit situation? Jir made a sound between a laugh and a sob, crossing the room in 3 quick strides to embrace the human. Nix caught him easily, and Azel saw how careful he was. This strange being who perhaps could have crushed her son without effort, holding him like precious glass. You came back, Jir mumbled into Nix's shoulder. I knew you would. Everyone said I was crazy, but I knew. I'm sorry it took so long, Nix said gently. There were debates, arguments, so much bureaucracy, but I never forgot. Neither did the others who rescued me. We've been watching, making sure the changes didn't happen too fast, that your society could adapt. He looked over Jir's shoulder at Azel. May I come in? There's much to discuss. She nodded, still stunned, and stepped aside. As Nix entered their home, ducking slightly to avoid the doorframe, she found herself really looking at him. The way he moved, favoring one leg slightly, the thin scars on his neck and hands, the kindness in those strange blue eyes. This was the dying stranger her son had fed his last fruit to. This was the Skyman who promised to help their world. This was real. They sat by the fire, Jir practically vibrating with excitement as he prepped Nix with questions. The human answered patiently, explaining the war, the Kardak's defeat, the long debates about how to help Jir's people without destroying their culture. We couldn't just show up and change everything, Nix said. Your people had to be ready, so we accelerated some natural processes, brought back species the Kardak had destroyed, restored water they'd stolen, made sure you had the resources to grow and develop on your own. The ocean, Azel said quietly. The forests. That was you? Well, not just me, many humans and other Federation species too. When I told them about Jir, about what he did, Nix's voice grew thick. A child who gave his last fruit to a dying alien soldier. It became a famous story, a reminder of why we fight. But I'm not innocent anymore, Jir protested. I understand now what the Kardak were doing. The slavery, the exploitation. I understand evil exists. Well, of course you do, Nix observed. Time flies, doesn't it? They talked long into the evening about the changes to their world, about the Federation, about possibilities. Finally, as the fire burned low, Nix grew serious. I need to be honest with you both. My presence here, our contact, it's changed things. The Federation has decided that our interference, however well-intentioned, has already altered your natural development. We can't undo that, so we're offering a choice. What kind of choice? Azel asked, though part of her already knew. We can leave, pull back all observers, remove all traces of our presence. Your people will develop on their own as they would have without the Kardak or us. Or, he paused, looking between them, we can invite those who wish it to learn about the wider galaxy, to travel, study, maybe even find new homes among the stars. The choice would be individual. Anyone who wants to stay can stay. But for those ready to see what lies beyond... Yes, Jir said immediately. Yes, I want... think about it, Nix interrupted gently. This isn't a decision to make lightly. It would mean leaving everything you know. Your world is healing, becoming the paradise it should have been. You could have a good life here. But there's so much more out there, Jir said. You taught me that when you told me about your people, about fighting the demons, about stars. I want to be part of that. I want to learn, to help others like you helped us. Azel watched her son, nearly grown now, his father's determination shining in his eyes, and felt a bittersweet pride. She'd known this day would come, one way or another. He'd inherited too much of Kelm's wandering spirit to stay in one place forever. "What about those who leave?" she asked. "Can they return?" "Always," Nix assured her. "This isn't exile, it's an opportunity, and—" He smiled slightly. "I may have pulled some strings. The Galactic University of Xenopsychology has a scholarship program now. Full funding for students from recently contacted worlds." "Xeno what?" Jir asked. "People who are good at understanding and connecting with other species. People who give their last fruit to strangers." Azel made her decision then, looking at her son's shining eyes and remembering the little boy who'd insisted on feeding a dying Skyman. "We'll go," she said quietly. "Both of us." Jir whirled to stare at her. "Mother, you don't have to." "You think I'd let you wander the stars alone? Someone needs to make sure you eat properly." She managed to smile through the tears threatening to fall. "Besides, I want to see what is there in the stars too." The human smiled and said, "That's the spirit." Outside, Nix's skybird descended from the dawn sky, ready to carry them into the unknown. Azel took her son's hand, and together they walked toward their future, leaving behind a world marked by a new ocean and 3 thriving forests, born because, long ago, her son had given his last fruit to a human in need.